Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, segment 9, and our final segment on our stamp series. I've had an absolute blast. In fact, this series has opened my eyes to stamps. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about casing, but then after that, let's see what else we can add to our stamp designs to really make these stand out. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to our website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, talk just a minute about casing our leather. This is a point that I've stressed over for several segments. When I pull a swatch out, I'm not actually saying this leather is cased. Well, if you're new to leather, all the difference in the world. We've got a good video on this, so we're not going to go into all the details. But the point is the outcome. We've got some good examples here. So right here, I've got 3 pieces of leather. First off, absolutely dry. This is a piece of leather that I've simply run a sponge across, give it about 15 minutes. Right here, absolutely too wet. So let's start right here. Now, we'll jump over to our punch table to see what we're actually doing. I'm right-handed, but the point is the impression. So absolutely dry piece of leather. Let's try a stamp here. Okay, well, if we don't have anything to compare that to, it's not bad, but it is certainly not great. A piece of leather, now again, I've just taken a sponge, run this across. Now, we're going to get a pretty good impression here, but the problem is, yeah, not bad. That looks pretty good. And again, if we have nothing to compare it with, that's an excellent stamp. The problem is as this dries, that stamp's going to push out a little bit. We're not going to have that clean, crisp impression. Okay, here's a piece of cased leather. Now, with the pros, they can hit it once and move on, and it's beautiful. I'm not in that group. But right here, now we've got a good impression. Very similar, absolutely. But what's happening is our leather is wet through and through. So that stamp's going to stay exactly where it is. But also, well, notice, it's hard to see this, but that's actually burnishing the leather a little bit. So that's going to stay exactly where it is. Let's try one more. This is a piece of leather that is absolutely too wet. Now, this is funny, and I'll try to explain this. But as kids, we would throw a rock into mud, right? And that mud would actually separate out from that rock. That's exactly what's going to happen to our stamp here. Yeah, there we go. Mushy is the only term I can use on that. Now with casing, we don't have this little 1-minute window. We can absolutely re-wet our leather. The point is, the more we re-wet that, the more that stamp impression, or the stamp impressions, they're going to back out a little bit. We want a very crisp, very clean impression, and we want that to stay. That's the point of casing. Now, one more point, and I'm bad about this, but say a smaller stamp, cedar, perfect example. I can really lay into the stamp, a lot of metal on the head. But if I do the same thing to my cedar, wow, I've almost punched a hole right there. So with a lot of these tools, we need to back out on the pressure we strike our tool with. So right here, if I work that just a little bit easier, yeah, there we go. Now we can see every detail on that stamp, and it's going to match every other stamp. That's a big point. Last one, and I've talked about this, but let's go over it. Because again, none of us are the absolute top-notch pros. If I don't have a stamp that's perfectly consistent, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, so right there, good and heavy on this side, very light on that side. We can always drop our stamp back in there. I can actually feel that click right back down into that impression. So now let's just work lightly on the other side. Perfectly consistent stamp. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so let's jump over to our punch table. We're going to look at some designs, talk about what we're going to do. Then we're going to jump back over here. We've seen the majority of these designs in the past, so we're not going to spend a lot of time over here. But let's do this. Let's take a sample from each of our 4 categories from our combinations video. Basically border, strap, belt or cuff, standalone, and panel. Let's talk about these, look at the tools we use, then we're going to jump back over to our pattern table, see what else we can add into these to make them pop. So basic border stamp, one of my all-time favorites, because it's easy to make this look good. Also, it's going to go around a corner nicely, and we can manipulate the length simply by the veiner that we use. Right there, continuous mule's foot. We can use just about any stamp there. Make these your own. Now the spread on this, 2 inches or about 5.08 centimeters. A very Western border stamp. Now our spread here, 5.71 centimeters or 2¼ inches. 3 tools. Camo, the wire side of our barbed wire set, and another camo, or I tend to call that more of a starburst. But again, this is going to look great on any border. And last, let's just toss this in because I love the look of this. Right here, we've got a very cool, almost a serpentine look to that. Very Western. Right here, our circle burst and our axe head. On our strap or belt, or maybe say a cuff. Love this. Now in our past video, we dropped in cedars in between here. Let's drop in a spot. Now for width, this is right at, there we go, right at 1 inch wide. So that's going to look good on a 1½ inch belt. We haven't seen this, but I dropped this in just because I love the look. I love the design that emerges. All we're using here, simple hourglass stamp, and again, our veiner. Now right down here, I dropped this in because I simply want to see what this looks like with a spot down the center. Width-wise, the width of our tool here is about 5/8 of an inch, and that's going to look good on, say, a 1 inch cuff or belt. This is a 1/2 inch, so maybe a 3/4 inch strap. Last up, panels. I can't stop playing with these. Right there, that is just one tool. Our hourglass tool, we've seen that. All kinds of possibilities there. And our last, our basket weave. Since I've started using a basket weave for configurations beyond a simple basket weave design, I can't stop here. So we've got our basket weave and we've got our circle burst. How cool is that? All right, we got a feel for what we're doing. Let's jump over to our punch or our pattern table. Let's see what else we can add. But you know what? The big rule here, let's have fun with it. If you've actually lost sleep trying to come up with the coolest possible design or the most beautiful combination of stamps, well, first off, you are not alone. But secondly, this is not going to help at all. So what I've done to save us a little time, I've dyed our swatches. Right there, that's the Pro dye. That's the light brown. Our stamp doesn't really pop. We're going to do something about that. Right here, Pro dye walnut. On a whim, there's a red, but I think that's going to be beautiful. And a mix, one of my favorite colors. This is a 50-50 mix, Pro dye, light brown, and mahogany. Now, black. We might not want to dye our stamp designs in black. Well, actually, quite the opposite. That is absolutely beautiful. It's a gorgeous detail. And if we really want our stamps to stand out, right here I've dyed our main body in a Pro light brown. Then I've come back in with a Pro black, simply painted that in with a paintbrush. So all kinds of ways we can go with black, and we are absolutely going to see that design. Okay, so our first step, we're going to add some antique to some of these. I'm not going to go with the red. I want to keep that right where it is. But let's add antique both to our light brown, our walnut, and our mix. But also our black, we're going to go a little bit left field on that one. So what I'll do, first thing, let's tape the back of our swatches, because to me, to see antique wrap around, that just looks really unprofessional. So I'm going to add tape to all of these, and then we'll add some antique. With our antique, there are so many ways we can go, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But right here, with an antique, what I prefer to do is I'm going to start with a rag, and I'm going to get antique on my top grain. Once that's on, it's not going to get any darker. Well, it will, but we really have to try. Then I'm going to come back with my dauber and work my antique down into my stamps. So let's start right here. And there we go. So now we've got the color from the antique, but it's not really sinking down. So let's jump over to a dauber. Again, a little bit sparingly. Now let's work our dauber down into our stamped areas, but also I want that antique in my groove line as well. Well, that is simply beautiful. I love that leather color. This is going to look good when we drop a top coat on it. But notice the difference too. Absolutely love that. To me, that's a very traditional leather color. Now, I'm using a medium brown antique. I typically don't go darker because that's really going to affect the overall color. I like that right where it is. So I'm going to do the same thing to the balance of our panels. Well, that looks good. I love the look of that. Again, when a top coat hits this, that is going to pop. So let's jump over to our black. Let's just see what happens here. So we've got what's called a neutral antique. So therefore, we can mix that with any one of our Angelus colors and get all kinds of beautiful antiques. In the past, we've had 5 colors. Well, now, sky's the limit. So the mix here, this is about a 50-50 mix. 50 of the neutral and 50 of the Angelus turquoise. So let's rub this on. Let's just see what happens here. Now, it's not making too much of a difference there, but I can see a little bit of a hint of the turquoise. So now let's jump over to our dauber. Let's see if we can get this to sink down in our stamps and our groove line. Well, that looks good. We've definitely got a black belt or strap, but now we've got that beautiful turquoise. That's a nice touch. All right, let's let all of this dry. Then let's add a top coat. Our antique has had time to dry, so we're going to drop on a leather balm. Now, here's a good point. Like right here, we've got a bit of a patina, or we've got a little bit darker. If you don't want that to happen, top coat, then add your antique. Then it will just sink down in our stamps. But I just like that look. All right, let's start right here. So with leather balm, I'm going to use 2 rags. I've got a rag to apply and then a rag to buff. So let's start on this piece. Let's give that just a second to dry. Good. Now let's buff this. Well, that just pops. I'm going to try to keep that out of the glare from the lights. Absolutely beautiful and finished. We've got one more step we're going to do to this. So I'm going to do the balance of the panels with the top coat. Then we'll jump over to some spots. Well, that design pops now, doesn't it? I can see the detail. Love that gloss. Right here, the red. Absolutely professional. Really happy with the way that came out. And our dye mix. That's a beautiful color. Okay, let's reset here. We're going to add some spots. If you're losing sleep over the combinations, well, we're just going to make it worse. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm going to do my best not to roll here, but I love spots. They're inexpensive, they're easy to add, and they look good. We're not going to spend a lot of time adding the spots. That's in most of our videos. But there are 2 things we want to work on here. First off, proportion. Like with this design, I can't wait to put this onto something. But say we jump up to a 1/2 inch spot. Well, that's simply going to drown out the balance of the design. We'll see the spot and not our beautiful stamp work. So let's back up, okay? Size. We've got multiple sizes, but the 3 I typically work with. 3/16 inch or about 4.76 millimeters. 1/4 inch, my go-to. That's 6.35 millimeters and a little bit larger. 5/16, that's 7.93 millimeters, okay? Let's start right here. Beautiful red. Well, with our finishes, we've got antique bronze, antique copper, antique nickel, brass, nickel. In fact, we've even got spots with decorative caps on them. How are we going to work that in with our stamp design? Or maybe our stamp design to our spot? Okay, let's back up. I'm starting to roll. Let's back up. So on this beautiful red, let's go with a 1/4 inch polished nickel. That's going to be beautiful. Yeah, they're all over my floor. It is the way it is. So right here, my favorite finish, I believe, is the antique nickel. Well, a 1/4 inch, that might be just a little bit large. So let's jump down, there we go, to a 3/16 antique nickel. That's going to pop. Okay, right here, oh, we've got turquoise rivets. I'm not sure if I want to go with a nice high polished nickel. That would really make this design pop. Or say we drop in our turquoise, between each design, or down the middle, or no, wait, back up, not what we're doing. Okay, so on that one, I'm not sure. I'm gonna make a decision when I get to that one. So right here, very small, maybe antique bronze. That would be a nice touch right in the center. It's not too much for our eyes to see. It makes a nice detail. So let's go with a 3/16 inch antique bronze. Over here, again, I'm not sure which way to go, but definitely a 1/4 inch. Probably antique nickel on this brown. That would look good. So let's do this, antique nickel. Yeah, I think that's that's a win there. Right here, well, we've got a smaller area. How about we go with an antique bronze here as well? Again, a nice detail. Not going to be super visible until we get a bit of a closer look. Right here, I think I might just leave that where it is. That's beautiful. I can't wait to see that, say on a rifle scabbard, or a gun rig, or a pouch flap. Again, I think that looks good right where it is. And over here, our die mix. This is a tough one. We could go so many different ways, but again, I think right there, an antique nickel is going to sit beautifully. Antique nickel 1/4. Okay, so I'm going to set the spots in all of our samples. Let's see how these look. I couldn't decide which way to go on that. I like both designs. That really is a perfect detail for our antique, but the nickel spot, that just pops. It just looks so good. I think my two favorite, right here, the nickel on the red, that stamp really stands out, and when we look closer, we see that detail. I can't wait to put that on a cuff or a belt. I think one of my all-time favorites. Just a small touch of metal there, antique nickel. That looks good. Now, one point, with our smaller spots, that's got a much smaller tine on it. It struggles to get through our 8 to 9, 4 to 5, no problem. Well, I didn't go with the bronze. It just faded into the background. But that's a nice touch. It's a nice detail. But again, just a little metal in that. For us period folks, I love this. So I went with the spot instead of in the square in the flower design. So I think when I actually do this, I might drop in a geometric there. Classic leather color again to me. Brass, antique nickel, both of those look good. And we can always tie these into whatever color hardware we're going with. Small brass. Yep, there we go. I can't wait to put that design on something. All right, so we got a feel for spots. Let's clean this up, reset. Let's talk a few more options. How many additional ways can we go with our stamps? Well, in all honesty, I have no idea. Letter stamps. We can always decorate a basic letter stamp, or how about we create a design that works out from a single letter, initials, or a name. Sky's the limit on that one. Whole new direction. Now, block dyeing. This is a pretty cool technique, but in all honesty, we don't really have a lot of very hard edges. So when we try to block dye, it just looks relatively inconsistent, but definitely a technique worth exploring. Again, one of my favorite designs, that's our Crusader cross, simply butted together. But now we've got this additional design. How about we add some paint to that? Drop in a dye color, some paint. That would look good, and talk about detailed. Can we work in some thread or some lace? I have no idea. I haven't even gone there yet, but I bet we certainly can. So take any one of these ideas, run with it, and have a blast doing it. And that's exactly right. That's the point. Let's have fun with it. Now, looking back through the comments from this series, and I read every comment on YouTube, but I notice we've got a lot of similar comments. Never thought about stamps in this light. I have to agree. I'm in that same boat. I've done a couple of border stamps, a couple of panels, but I never thought about the extent that we have seen here. There are so many designs. I just can't wait to put these on projects, and I hope you feel the same way. One more hope. I hope you come up with the most perfect, beautiful stamp combination anyone has ever seen. Good luck with your projects.